All right, so GitOps with GitLab. That's going to be the theme for today. What is GitOps? There are a lot of definitions out there, but here's a concise one. To have Git, the version control system, to have Git as the single source of truth for your IT operations. That is, in your organization, if your developers are creating software, that code should go inside Git. Related to that software, all the build jobs and the test jobs and the deploy, the whole pipeline, that should also go inside Git. And the third part is to have your infrastructure that this code should run on, have that inside Git. So how do you go about putting infrastructure inside a version control system? If you can represent the infrastructure as a schematic, like in a code form, then it is possible. So doing that entails the following. There are some tools that you can use, but primarily there are like three general concepts regarding that. One is to use a markup language like YAML, for example. So if you use Ansible, then you can actually create a schematic for all the resources, the infra resources inside a YAML file or a JSON actually. If you use something like TerraForm, then they have a DSL, a language specifically created for creating models of your infra resources. So they call it the HCL, the HashiCorp language. Or if you use Pulumi, then you can have general purpose programming languages to actually create schematics of your infra. Regardless of which approach you use, two things remain the same. One is that the infrastructure scheme is readable by humans and machines. And two, you can execute them. So you can execute them manually or automatically, but you can execute them. And if you execute the scheme, then the infra gets created. That should be the idea behind it. Question there in the chat. Cool pointer feature. Thank you, Vlad. Yeah, it's part of Google Docs, so they have this nice pointer there. Okay, so jumping ahead, why would you want to do this? The benefits would be basically threefold, really. It's either cost related, speed related, or you can reduce risk. So if your infrastructure is denoted as a script, then you can execute it and the execution is repeatable. So if your infrastructure schematic is quite complex, you have like, let's say a dozen services up and running in different places and resources, then if you have it as a script, you can execute them again and again really fast. So you reduce effort, which obviously gives you speed and cost benefits. Again, script execution is faster than the way humans are going to do it. So whether it's human doing it manually or human using a GUI to provision the infra, script execution is always going to be faster. So again, cost and speed benefits. Script execution can be automated. Humans cannot, at least not legally. So, that's another benefit that you get in the cost and speed column. The thing with scripts are that you can test them. You can write them once, you can test them, and every time after which, when you execute, you have consistency in what gets created. So you reduce risk and cost by that, because you also eliminate human error. So a quick summary of the benefits of the general concept of having infrastructure as code. But then where does GitLab fit into this picture? So I'll give you like a TLDR version. If you're familiar with Git and GitLab, you already know this. But just to elaborate in the next few seconds, what you can do with GitLab. Generally in Git, you would have one branch, which is the main branch, usually called the master branch. This branch represents the stable production state of your code. And now it represents also the stable production state of your IT infrastructure. Suppose you want to make a change to this. Let's say I'm the DevOps engineer. I want to make a change. I would branch off my feature. I would branch off my master branch into a feature branch. So then I have another copy of the code where I'm doing all my work. This is like a private place where I'm just testing things out. Let's say I make my changes. I run the changes on my local environment. I like the changes. So now I push them onto my feature branch. And the minute I start pushing them onto my feature branch, the GitLab pipeline kicks in and starts executing my changes. So the pipeline would have jobs to verify if my changes are actually valid or not. If it is not valid, the build is going to fail and I have to make fixes in the feature branch. If the verification of my infra changes is good, then you basically apply these changes inside the environment as well. So this also would be done via a pipeline job. So it applies the changes in the test environment and I can actually play around with it. Finally, let's say I'm happy with this. Now I want my changes to come back into master. For this, the mechanism would be using git merge requests, wherein my pipelines should pass and I have to invite my colleagues, human approvers, to see if they like the changes or not. So let's say in my organization, the rule is that 3 approvals are required before something can be merged back. That check is happening at this level. Once all approved, it goes back into master, and then GitLab pipelines could automatically execute and publish the changes to the prod environment, or it can do it in a manual basis. That's the rough idea. Any questions about this?
I have a quick question. What's the best way to manage different credentials? Because probably in the testing stage, I would use some sort of a cloud environment, and then moving it closer to production, it will be something else. And then we need different credentials, keys, whatever. And yeah, what would be the best way to do this?
Yeah, I always don't like to answer questions which say that what is the best way, because it's hard to have one best way, because that's always depends on your particular situation. But there are certain ways. One way that I will show you in the demos a little further is to use environment variables and to have GitLab pass them through. That's just one of the many ways. Like you said, there could be a cloud provider that passes these through as well. So I would like to maybe after this demo, we can speak further, try to understand your situation and to find out the best way for you.
Okay,
yeah.
Fair enough.
Thanks.
I have, Sri, I have also one question or suggestion, however you want to call it, and it would eventually fit into not that slide, but the slide before. I've gotten that question before, and that is, hey, we want to go to, we're going to move from mutable to immutable infrastructures. So as a bit of a, as a good thing, immutable infrastructures are a good thing. And I believe having infrastructure as code and the associated automation would make that possible in the first place. I think having immutable infrastructure without that automation and without infrastructure as code is probably way over the top and wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So the demo that I'm going to show you is actually infrastructure that is immutable. That is, you can only deploy to the resources being provisioned one time. And if you want to make changes, you deploy again and you provision new ones. So that is a good point. Probably I should have mentioned immutable infrastructure here in the benefits slide. But then thanks for that. That's a very good point.
At least it's a buzzword that sometimes pops up in conversations and it fits in.
Yeah, the thing with immutable properties in general is that you avoid state. So it just becomes much easier to manage. So this could be an immutable programming language, or it could be immutable infrastructure or whatever else. Just the fact that you don't have to deal with state over time, and then you can just press a button and everything gets created from scratch exactly as you want it. It's a huge benefit. It's a big cost and time saver.
I would add, and also consistency. When you know it's immutable, you're sure that, hey, we have that consistency.
Absolutely.
I've got a question then, so related to this, which is that say we use a tool like TerraForm that determines a desired state of your infrastructure. And if you make a change in, say, a feature branch, what you're effectively saying is that you're changing the desired state of your infrastructure. If you run the pipelines at your step 3 here, and that's the first time that pipeline, that infrastructure as code is executed, what you'll actually be testing is creating the entirety of that infrastructure in one go. You will not be testing actually having the previous state of the infrastructure and the patches that are required in order to get that infrastructure to the new state. So the question I have, Sri, is how do you ensure that that is actually tested? Because that is the code that's actually going to run when that branch is remerged back into master.
Yeah, that's a good question. TerraForm has this concept of state. So I was going to show it a bit further down my demo, but since you asked, let me just go right into my text editor. I need that. So for example, if I'm going into a project that I'm going to show you, and in my TerraForm, whenever you execute, that is, you run the command TerraForm apply, it actually applies the changes somewhere. And then the results of the application get stored as state. So in this case, I've got 3 workspaces, and I think I've run dev locally. So I've got the state in form of a JSON file. So your goal, if you want persistent infrastructure, your goal is to persist the state as well. So if you persist the TF state file, then you actually avoid, for good or bad, you avoid immutability in your infrastructure, and you actually build on top of what was already existing. But yeah, that's a good point. Thanks for that.
I guess okay, just not playing customer now. What I'm really getting at is that if you have a development environment that's also cloud-based, so you've got your production environment and you've got your development environment for this particular feature, that particular feature's environment doesn't actually exist. And so if the pipeline weren't to run until after you've made some changes, then it's not actually testing what will be applied to master. The key bit there is that we actually run the pipeline the moment that the merge request is created, before any changes are created, which will actually create your infrastructure in the existing state. And then
it depends. Yeah, it depends like which workspace are the jobs executing on.
Yeah.
So for example, I could run I could run TerraForm apply locally in the dev workspace, but I could push that state to my repo. And then if my pipeline executes the job on that particular workspace, it actually takes it forward. So the question is, do you actually persist state inside version control or not? And that would define, that would decide whether you're actually starting from scratch or you're actually building up from some existing state.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. All right. So what are the benefits of having GitLab in the IAC space, right? So again, the benefits are 3 main columns for them: cost, speed, and risk. Of course, what you get if your infrastructure state is versioned over time is that you can roll back quickly, right? And you can roll back in an easy manner. So this actually refers to persisting the TF state file as well. But if you can roll back, then of course you mitigate a lot of risk and you have cost and speed benefits. You can also adapt your existing or your previous infrastructure. For example, let's say I have a project that is starting now, but then the infrastructure that I have right now is not ideal for it. But 6 months ago, the infrastructure was perfect for it. With GitLab, you can actually just take how things were 6 months ago and you can build on top of that. The fact that your infrastructure changes pass through merge requests give you huge benefits. First is that it automatically gets verified across multiple environments. So you get this for free with the pipelines. You have this, you have the human reviewers as well. So the 4 eyes principle kicks in. And of course the auditability. So you are making changes to your infra and you have a log of what changes are being made. You have within that log, you have how those changes are being made and you know why those changes are being made. So if you use GitLab issues and merge requests and feature branches, all of these things get logged. Then the third thing, one of the benefits of having GitLab is you can define things at a group level. So that's going to be most of my demo. So after this slide, it's just the demo slide. Well, not the slide, the actual demo. But what you can do is that at a group level, you can define infrastructure blueprints, so to speak. And then all your projects, all your future projects can just get infrastructure provision for free based on these blueprints. So again, you get a lot of cost and speed benefits, of course, but then you also avoid risk in the sense that you only define and test things once, but it gets reused a lot. So in this scenario, in the demo, let's assume we have 3 teams. On the far left, you have the infra team. On the far right, you have the product team. And then, of course, you have the integration team in the middle. The product team on the far right is responsible for making the apps, making the products, right? They are not necessarily concerned with infra or operations. They just work closely with business and they try to make their apps better. And then on the other hand, you've got the infra team on the far left. They are responsible for maintaining the infrastructure overall for your organization. So they are not necessarily involved with a particular product, but they just want to make infra available for all. In this scenario, we're going to see the infra team creating infra blueprints, and then the integration team reusing them. So a blueprint is basically a reusable spec of certain IT infra resources. And then you just publish them, you make them available, and the integration team would consume the blueprint, and then it would consume the app and it would just make it work. So that's going to be the demo. The first part of the demo is setting up GitLab, and there's not really much to set up. GitLab by default is set up for this kind of work. One thing you want to do is you want to work with GitLab groups. So you can see I'm working with a group over here called GitOps with GitLab. And within the group, what you need is a subgroup, right? This subgroup needs to be marked as the project template folder. So if you go into settings for your group and you go into custom project templates, what you want to do is you want to select this group. Once you do this, you will have a certain set of benefits. Let me show you. That's the next part. Basically, if I'm to consume a blueprint, all I need to do is I need to create my blueprint as part of this group here. Comment coming in. Nice team logo. Thank you, Karina. So, so if I'm the infra team and I want to make certain number of blueprints available for my dev teams or my integration teams, I just create those projects within this subgroup over here. So in this case, I've got a blueprint which just provisions an Ubuntu instance on EC2. All right, now let me just play the role of the integration team. I'll say I want to create a new integration project, and I want to create from template. I select the group, and I select my infra blueprint for EC2 Ubuntu. So use template, say test Ubuntu. Wow, I'm using dashes and underscores and camel casing. So obviously I'm feeling really good today. Create the project. So what this is going to do is this actually takes the blueprint and makes it available as part of my integration project. So now I'm looking at my integration project, and thankfully it's got a README file. So now me as the integration engineer, I just have to follow the steps over here. And the steps are, okay, here they are. Okay, configure the environment variables, write the script. Sounds simple enough. Let me just see what happens if I try to run the pipeline without doing any of these. So I'm already seeing existing pipelines over here, even though I just created the project. But these are actually pipelines from the blueprint. So if I want to look at the pipeline of the blueprint, I have this available. I see that it's got 3 stages. At this point, I don't know what these stages are, but I see verify, provision, and deploy and destroy. The names are fairly simple. I probably know what's going on, but let's be certain. Let's have a look at, in my text editor at pipeline and TerraForm GitLab CI YAML. So these files are also available in the repository that I just created, of course. But here I'm actually seeing the jobs. I'm seeing 3 stages, and the stage verify is basically selecting some workspace. And I'm getting a comment, and probably the comment is the font size is too small. Is it? All right.
That's the comment.
Okay. So hope this works. But yeah, so I've got 3 stages: verify, provision, deploy, and destroy. Let's have a look at verify. I've got dev verify as a job, and what it's trying to do Up to here, doesn't matter. I don't care. I will explain this later. But let's look at what's going on. It's running TerraForm init. It's selecting a workspace and it's running plan. So plan is the TerraForm command that actually doesn't apply the changes, but just shows you what the changes would be. So it's kind of like a preview, but it also verifies if your changes are valid or not. So in this case, by running plan, I'm actually just verifying what's going on. In my second pad actually stands for provision and deploy. I'm doing the same thing. I'm selecting the workspace, but this time I'm doing TerraForm apply. So this is where the actual changes get applied, and destroy basically destroys that particular set of infrastructure resources that were created. Now I've also got the same set of jobs for test environments and prod environments, and different sets of jobs run at different stages. So the way it is set up right now, on the dev environment, everything is provisioned automatically whenever changes are pushed to a feature branch. Test, for whatever reason, provisions changes automatically when pushed to master branch, and prod in this demo can only be triggered manually. So it doesn't get auto-applied. All right, good enough. But what is it that is getting executed? So what is that infra getting created? That is in my TerraForm folder. You see I've got a main TF file over here. It's got a bunch of variables over here at the top. And then the provider is AWS. It's reading the access and the secret keys, the region. And then it's creating a resource, which is an AWS instance. EC2 Ubuntu is the name. And I'm passing the AMI, the instance type. And here's the funny thing, user data file, So the provider for TerraForm has this unique property called user data, which actually lets you execute a set of commands one time during the launch of the resource. So when this EC2 instance will be provisioned, one time I'm saying run the script as root. So this script lives in my deployment scripts folder. So if I look at my main SH over here, it's installing Apache and it's creating a HTML file with an image, which might be a cat because you're supposed to do that. Okay, so back to my TerraForm here. Basically, pretty simple. Run the script one time. That's the rule. So in this case, if you don't persist the state of your TerraForm, then this becomes an immutable infra. The state, like I mentioned, is persisted in this folder, the terraform.tfstate.d folder, and this is part of my version control. So if you were to create a blueprint for a lot of different teams to use, then of course the state is not going to be part of version control. The implementer of the blueprint will make it part of his project, but not me. What else do I have here? I'll show you my git ignore. It might, okay, so I'm ignoring the .terraform folder, which is basically a folder which contains the local TerraForm binary. So I'm running this on a Mac, but it's probably not going to run on a Mac when I run the jobs. So I don't need to push this binary there. Okay, so let's go back here and let's try to run the pipeline. And I think it should fail because I have not done the two things it asked me to do. I've not created the environment variables yet, and have not modified the deployment script. So this modifying the script is kind of optional because it's already got something that is going to provision Apache and a HTML file. So it's going to put a static web app somewhere. But I think I'm obligated to define the variables. While this runs and fails, do you have any questions at this moment?
More of an observation. What's your target audience for this?
What's my target audience? It would be potentially people who are going to provision infrastructure for their teams.
In that case, it might be a bit too detailed, which can basically make it, I mean, a bit too detailed.
Okay, let me just go with it and we can decide if it is detailed or not. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was great overview, great details, but for someone that already knows all this, it might be a bit too much. I don't know. That's my opinion, at least.
Fair enough. Fair enough. But okay, let me just get back to my jobs for now. Let's have a look. My job failed, and it failed because it says test access key needs to be defined. Okay, so why is it failing? It's running a validate Python script. So this is a script that is part of the blueprint, whose job is to validate if the environment variables are available. Very simple Python script, self-explanatory, checks if these 6 are available, these 5 are available. But okay, let's try to make this work. So far, remember, in GitLab, the only thing I've done is I've created a project. I've not modified any of the code. So showing you the code was like a bit of an extra, but you don't need to see what TerraForm does. You don't need to see the Python script. You just need to consume it. So if I go into my GitLab settings CI/CD, and if I look at my variables here, I get the option to define them. So I need my README because I'm going to define them for test at the moment. Access key. This is the most glamorous part of the demo where I actually put the values for the environment variables within GitLab, but there you go. Does somebody else have questions at this point or remarks? No. All right, so I'm just putting my values in here. And I am going to put my access key and secret key. And you will see them as part of the recording. But rest assured, I'm going to delete them right after the recording is complete. So I'm happy to make it available as part of the video. Okay, so define variables for the test environment. Let me save them. And let me go back to my pipeline. And if GitLab loads, here it is. I go into failed, see what's failed and try to rerun this. So now what's going to happen is if it is able to successfully verify, it will actually run the provision and deploy jobs as well, which means it's actually going to provision the infrastructure on AWS. Let me have that open on the side. And it's going to deploy my Hello World application as well. So in theory, by the time these 2 jobs complete, I should have a running web application somewhere. All right, let's see. Test verify, good. Let's look at the results of this job. So TerraForm, I like it because it actually shows you exactly what it's going to do as JSON. So this is what it's going to, so it says TerraForm will perform the following actions. An AWS EC2 instance would be created and it gives you the details of the resource. And what I will get at the end is I'm going to get an IP address, which is great because I'm running a web application. So I need this to have a look at it. And then since it's just planned right now, we did not apply the changes, but it's updated the state. And what I've done is I've not made the state as part of my, my version control, but it's part of my cache. So it's available for the next job. Let's have a look at the next job. Should be this one here. Test provision deploy. Okay, this takes about 40 seconds. So around this time, if you have questions, you can ask me or I can just take a bit of a break. Oh, faster, no break for me. But there are some questions coming in. Let's have a look. Font size ++, maybe recommend masking. That is true. That is so true, Simon. there's actually TerraForm lets you mask, so you don't have to pass the access key and the secret key as part of the TerraForm file. You can have them as part of your profile and you can pass them through, or there are some other ways as well. You can have something called a tfvars file, which is not part of your repo. And then on the, so there are various ways of doing it, but good point. Please do not put your access key inside your TF files. All right, great. It says that it's successfully created. Let's have a look. Do I see an instance? I want to see an instance with this public IP. Is this it? 3.136.156.02.102. Oh yeah, 3.136.156.102. All right, super. Now let's see if it actually works. So let me go here and there you go. An application deployed. So now if I were to be consuming this, what should I be doing? All I need to do is I need to modify one file. So I just go here and I just modify my deployment script, main sh. So it's a bash script. So regardless of the type of application I want to deploy, I just modify my changes here. And I can, in theory, deploy GitLab on this Ubuntu instance by just running apt-get. So that's the idea, and that's the demo. Questions?
First of all, thank you very much for preparing that. That's really good stuff. Yeah, if possible, put it on unfiltered and let Goonies know eventually to create some extra visibility. Interesting enhancement could be eventually, I don't know, in the area of using environment tags in the GitLab CI YAML file. I don't know whether one of that stuff is going to be possible, and environment specific variables.
Ooh, let me verify with you if this is what you mean. When you mean environment specific variables, if you look at my pipeline and my YAML file here,
yeah,
the TerraForm is working off these variables.
So you're using the dev access key and
yes. And because this is my dev job, I'm passing it the dev access key. But if I just go down to my test, for example, absolutely same variables being used by TerraForm, but then they're being set to my test access key. Is this what you mean?
No, not necessarily. I'm thinking of, can that be, or is there value in combining it with our deploy board feature and the environments? So the environment element in GitLab CI, and also in settings, CI, and variables there, CI variables, you have the ability to define per environment variables, different per environment. I don't know whether some of that can be used.
No, that's a very good point. I looked into it like a little bit, and I realized that if you have to use environments in GitLab, you need a host name. And I was probably just a bit lazy to not set those up right now.
It was related to my question, because, and that was the case of asking, hey, what's the best practice to manage all this, right? Because you have some access variables for each environment, and it can get complex and tricky to have to set up it, to set it up over and over again.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's really a better way of doing it. I mean, it was a true honest question coming from Vlad, not even coming from me as a customer or anything.
A final thing I want to mention, I saw once some sort of TerraForm integration in the open source world, where the execution of TerraForm plan gives you that information, what it does, right? Or what it would do when you would apply it. Commenting that or throwing that as a comment on a merge request might come in handy. If that pipeline is going to get executed from within a merge request, basically, Or
Yeah,
do you do?
that's a very good point. Let me just make a note of that.
Almost having the output of the plan being fed into the merge request. So
Yeah,
that then it can
and because we're not having a plugin architecture of any kind, like with Jenkins, where we could create a UI, there's one UI element that can be used, and that's a comment. And by making use of the GitLab API, you can basically have the CI job creating a comment, and the content would be the output of TerraForm plan, or TerraForm apply.
Yeah.
That is just some thought that might come in handy, if at all. Other than that, great demo. Shall we make that rather short, because there is another event taking place right now?
Yeah. I think we're done. So if there are no more comments, we can just end this.
Yeah, round of applause, first of all. I mean, that was
Thank
great.
you.
Very cool demo, Sri.
Yeah, really well done, Sri.
Thank you. See you on the other call.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Sri. Thanks, everyone.